Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to tell you 8 true Halloween horror stories from deep within the Appalachian Mountains, where the wind whispers like a voice, and the campfires never really die out after midnight. If you've ever wondered why people say you shouldn't go outside once the clock strikes 12, maybe you're about to find out. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and comment where you're listening from, because one of these 8 stories might have started not too far from your home. Now then, let's begin. I just wanted her to have one good Halloween. The kind I remembered as a kid. Quiet streets, porch lanterns, the rustle of candy bags dragging along driveways. No pop-up horror houses. No drunk college kids in plastic devil horns. Just her little tail swishing behind her, walking from one neighbor's smile to the next. We left Asheville 2 days early, packed light, and drove north into West Virginia, up to my mother's old place near Elkins. Emma had never been there before. It was one of those small towns that still does a real fall festival, hay rides and all. And trick-or-treat was always simple and sweet. She wore a mermaid costume, glittery, bright green, with a little purple shell top. It was a bit too thin for mountain air, but she didn't care. She twirled in it right up until we joined the neighborhood kids near sunset. A small crowd had already gathered on the edge of Birch Street, parents chatting in soft clusters, flashlights blinking across leaves. I recognized the rhythm of it right away. Lanterns hung in even rows across porches, carved pumpkins flickering calmly. No flashing strobe lights or spooky recordings. Just the soft crunch of feet, the occasional laugh, the polite call of trick or treat. Emma gripped her pail and whispered, "Can we go to all of them?" I told her, "Every single one." He said, that was when I first saw him, standing near the back of the group, behind a few older kids. A boy, small, maybe 6 or 7, wearing what looked like a faded white robe or blanket, frayed at the hem. His face was pale under the porch lights, and his eyes stayed fixed on Emma as she skipped from house to house. At first, I thought he might be shy. He didn't have a bucket, didn't knock on any doors, just followed from a distance, always the last to arrive, never stepping onto any porches. Once, I caught his gaze, and he quickly looked down. I leaned over to another mom I didn't recognize and asked, "Do you know that little boy in the back too?" She looked where I pointed, then blinked. "No idea. Thought he was with you." An older woman, sitting on a folding chair nearby, said softly, almost like a memory, "There's always one who doesn't take candy." That most information. Emma noticed him too. Halfway down the block, she tugged at my coat and whispered, "He wants me to go play. He said there's a place in the yard by the woods." That was enough for me. I knelt down and told her, firmly, "You stay with me, okay? No wandering. This is as late of this way." She nodded, then frowned. "He's not scary. He just doesn't like to be alone." Asin. When we got back to my mom's place, I emptied Emma's candy onto a towel in the living room, just to check. It was mostly the usual stuff. Chocolate bars, lollipops, fun-sized gummies. But one thing stood out. A small candy wrapped in gold foil, the kind you don't see anymore. It looked old. Not expired exactly, but like it came from another decade. I asked where she got it. Emma said, "He gave it to me. The quiet boy is not Taze." I picked it up. It felt almost warm. I didn't want to scare her, so I nodded and dropped it in the trash under the sink. That night, after she fell asleep in the guest room, I started packing up the costumes in plastic buckets. When I looked inside her pail again, the gold candy was gone. Instead, lying at the bottom, was something I definitely hadn't seen before. A pair of tiny leather slippers, child-sized, mud still clinging to the soles. I stared at them, too stunned to touch them. My first thought was that it had to be some leftover from the attic, something of mine from years ago, but I'd never worn shoes like that. I grew up in sneakers and jelly sandals. Around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The hallway creaked like always, and the furnace ticked under the floor. But then I noticed it. The front door was slightly open. Not wide, just enough to let in the October air. And through that thin slice of open space, I could see her. Emma, barefoot in the grass, standing in the middle of the front yard. Her face was turned toward the woods. She wasn't moving, not even when I whispered her name. I ran barefoot across the porch and grabbed her by the arm. Her skin was ice cold, like she'd been standing out there for hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. She didn't flinch. She just looked up at me and said, "He said we're the same. This is not with at work." I carried her inside, wrapped her in 2 blankets, and held her until her shaking stopped. She didn't cry. Her eyes were unfocused, as if she was watching something else move just beyond the walls. Around dawn, she started burning up, forehead slick with sweat, cheeks flushed. She mumbled in her sleep, sentences that didn't make sense. The door opened. I remember now. I was cold before. "You see, as God." Her voice dropped low after that, almost too quiet to catch. I sat by her bed and didn't move. Later that day, I made calls. I needed something, anything, to explain what was happening. I asked around the neighborhood, old friends, even the historical society in town. What I learned stayed with me longer than it should have. There used to be a children's ward out past the tree line. Not a hospital exactly, more like a quarantine building. During the flu epidemic in 1938, kids who were sick or suspected of being sick were kept there, away from the rest of town. Some never came back. One name surfaced more than once: Thomas. Age, unknown. Died on Halloween night. No one knew where he was buried. The grave had supposedly sunk or been relocated. Some said his parents were gone before he passed. Others claimed he'd been left alone in the building when it burned. That night, I stayed in the guest room with Emma. I locked every door and window, closed the curtains, unplugged the porch light. My mother sat quietly in her chair by the fire, barely speaking. She said something that caught in my throat. "Every year," she whispered, "there's always one child who shows up, then leaves when no one says their name. This kind, which being now, Halloween ticked past midnight. The quiet was thick, unnatural." Emma slept with her hand wrapped around my wrist, like she knew what time it was. I stayed awake, watching the door. 2:07 a.m. The doorbell rang. One soft chime, then silence. I froze, slowly got up, crossed the room. My feet didn't make a sound on the carpet. I pressed my eye to the peephole. No one. But out in the yard, something white stood motionless. The same small figure, pale cloth fluttering around its legs, like a robe or a sheet. Its hand was raised, holding a plastic candy pail, identical to Emma's, but empty. I stepped back and pulled the curtain shut. Behind me, I heard footsteps, not far, right behind the wall. And then, a child's voice, calm and clear, whispered. If she had eaten it, she wouldn't be scared anymore. "This is Appalachian." I turned. Nothing there. Emma stirred, sat up briefly. Her eyes were wide, cloudy. She reached for me, her fingers freezing. Then she dropped back into sleep. By morning, the yard looked normal again. Light spilled through the trees. The air smelled of leaves and wood smoke. Emma's candy pail was gone. I searched the house, the porch, the yard. Nothing. Except for a new pair of leather slippers sitting on the front step. Same style, same size, but clean, almost polished. I said nothing, not to my mother, not to Emma. We packed and left that afternoon. The next October, someone told me, a girl with curly hair in a green mermaid costume was seen standing at the end of a trick-or-treat line. Not knocking, not speaking, just watching the other children walk by. I still remember the morning we left Charlotte. The light was soft and the roads were empty. Like the whole city agreed we deserved to disappear for a while. Bee had her feet on the dash, playing with her hair tie, grinning the whole time. She hated Halloween. Truly. Not in a dramatic way. Just deep, steady dislike. The lanterns. The kids knocking at every door. The cheap haunted house soundtracks playing from street speakers. She said it all felt fake. And worse, invasive. I used to think it was just because she grew up in a quieter suburb. But once, she told me something. One Halloween night when she was little, she got locked out in the backyard for almost 2 hours. Nobody heard her banging on the door. She never said if it was an accident or not. After that, Halloween was ruined for her. So that year, we decided to vanish. No costumes, no parties. Just the two of us. A rented cabin somewhere up in the high woods near Paint Rock, Tennessee. Secluded, off-grid. She booked it. The road getting there turned narrow fast. The last mile felt like threading a needle through trees. No signal, no power lines. Just us and the woods. The cabin was old but clean. Everything paneled in dark pine. The smell of sap and old fireplace still lingering. No Wi-Fi. No TV. Phones might as well have been paperweights. The first thing that got to me, even though it was small, was the latch. That old hook-style door latch on the front door. I remembered clearly clicking it shut that first night. It made a sharp, metallic sound. But the next morning, when I went to open the door for coffee, the latch was already undone, hanging loose. I thought maybe I hadn't closed it all the way, or the wind shook it loose. But it wasn't that kind of latch. You had to lift and slide it into place. It wouldn't fall open on its own. I told Bee. She just shrugged and said, maybe the cabin has its own rhythm. I laughed along, but it stuck in my head. I should have left that latch the way it was. Something out there was used to it. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk around the perimeter. There was a trail that curved up toward a mossy ridge behind the cabin. That's where we noticed them. Little stacks of stones, just a few inches high, shaped like arrows, pointing down toward the thicker part of the woods. Bee stared at them for a long time, then turned and kept walking. She didn't say anything. That night, Bee nudged me awake past midnight. She said she heard footsteps. On the roof, slow and even. I sat up and listened, but I only heard branches creaking, probably a tree limb. I told her, and pulled her back down. She didn't go back to sleep. The next morning, the flashlight she always left on her nightstand was switched on. Weak light, but steady. Neither of us had touched it. Then, while digging in the closet for her coat, a small object rolled out and hit the floor. An old, rusted door latch. The same kind as the one on the front door, but more bent, more decayed. I didn't remember seeing it before. That was when Bee really started looking. She pulled the mattress off the bed, checked every corner of the room. Under the frame, she found a thin notebook. Torn spine, yellow pages. Only a few lines written on the first page. Oc 31. Someone latched it, but it opened. We faxed another. No name, no context. Just that. She looked at me like she recognized the handwriting. I asked if she did, but she said no. I told her we could leave early. She wanted to, but I said maybe one more night, just to be sure we weren't freaking ourselves out, probably the last guest messing around. I told her. She didn't answer. That evening, I locked the front door tight, used both the latch and the padlock I brought from home. I tugged hard. It held. Bee stood behind me with a cup of tea, saying nothing. We went to bed early. I woke to Bea's breathing, shallow and fast. The clock read 2 a.m. She was sitting up in bed, staring past me. At the front door, it was wide open. Latch, lock, everything undone. I jumped out of bed. Outside the door, Sitting right at the threshold was a single flat stone. Someone had dragged it into place. Across the surface were thin, deep scratches, like nail marks. I kicked it away and slammed the door shut. And that's when I saw it. Carved deep into the wood beside the frame, just above eye level, were rows of words. Over and over, the same phrase. Just this night, this craft dale, etched like a chant, molded over with time. Whoever wrote it had done so long ago, and maybe not just once. We didn't sleep after that. Bee sat in the corner of the bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the door. I checked every inch of the cabin, from the fireplace to the crawl space, but nothing looked out of place, except for one thing. Every latch on every window and door was hanging loose, open in the same way. By morning, the sky had gone gray with fog. The light never reached the ground. It just hung there, trapped among the trees. I packed our bags fast and went to start the car. The engine coughed once, then died. I popped the hood, checked the battery, the cables. Everything looked fine. When I turned around, Bee was standing at the tree line, looking out toward the woods. Her voice was quiet. "Someone's there," she said. I followed her gaze but saw nothing. Just trunks, shadows, and mist. Still, something in me tightened. It was too silent. We tried calling for help, but there was no signal at all. Not even a flicker. The phones might as well have been toys. Bee's breathing turned quick and shallow. She said she could feel someone watching from the other side of the door. Not seeing, feeling, like a pressure just beyond the wood. I closed all the curtains. Every room felt smaller after that. The air got heavier, like the cabin was sealing itself from the inside out. I tried to make tea, mostly to calm her, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't tell if the water on the counter was from the kettle or my palms. By late afternoon, the fog had thinned into this strange golden light. It filtered through the cracks between the curtains and painted the floor in long, trembling lines. Bee said it looked beautiful. She smiled for the first time in 2 days. We sat at the table, sipping tea, not talking. For a short while, it almost felt like nothing had happened. I used wire to lock the main door from the inside, threading it through the latch and around the handle. Then I dragged a chair in front of it, just in case. Every window was braced shut with whatever furniture we had. The fire in the stove burned slow and low. Bee rested her head on my shoulder and fell asleep. For a moment I thought, maybe that's it. Maybe whatever it was has passed. But at 1:47 a.m., I woke up to her pulling at my arm. Her eyes were open wide, pupils huge in the dark. "Footsteps," she whispered. Her breath hit my ear, cold and shaky. Then I heard it too. Wood creaking under weight. Slow, rhythmic, moving closer to the bed. I sat up. The fire was almost out, just a faint orange glow on the walls. My eyes adjusted enough to see the door to our bedroom. It was open. I knew I'd latched it from the inside before lying down. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floor felt colder than before, like the warmth had been drained away. The door eased open wider. Not fast. Just enough for the hinge to whisper. Bee's voice came from behind me, barely audible. It got in, through the door. "Is she?" At first, I thought the darkness was playing tricks on me. But then I saw it. Right there, standing at the edge of the doorway. A figure. Not tall, not sure. Thin, with its head tilted, as if listening. One hand rested on the doorframe. I couldn't make out a face. Bee screamed. I lunged forward. The door slammed shut under my shoulder with a violent crack. The cabin shook. Click. The latch flipped open again. I froze. My hand still gripped the knob. My pulse felt like it was trying to tear out of my throat. Bee whispered my name, but I couldn't answer. Then came the sound. The same slow footsteps. This time moving away. Each creak softer. farther, until there was nothing. We left at first light, walked the 2 miles down to the main road and flagged a tow truck. I didn't look back at the cabin. Not once. A week later, I still couldn't sleep. Every time I heard the sound of a latch closing, even faintly, my body locked up. I couldn't stay in a room with the door shut unless someone else was on the other side. It felt like being sealed in with something that was still listening. Bea moved out a few days after that. She told me, "I can't stand the way you look at the door when I lock it. Is Tilnessy." I didn't argue. Because she was right. Something did get in. And whatever it was, it didn't stay behind. I've done the Halloween festival setup in Boone for 15 years now. Ever since I started teaching at the high school, it just made sense. I knew where the cords ran, which lights could short, which extension boxes not to touch if you wanted to keep your eyebrows. I always said I liked the routine, but the truth is I liked the sense of control. Last year took that from me. A boy, Connor Tills, 14, died during setup. He wasn't even supposed to be near the main pole. But something in the wiring arced when he touched a string of lights. Just like that. 1 second. Laughter. The next. Screams. We canceled the rest of the festival that year. The news folks came and went. There was a small memorial. Nothing felt enough. I didn't sleep right for months. This year, I told myself we'd do it better. Safer. We inspected every wire. Triple-checked the fuses. I personally walked the town square with a clipboard and a flashlight 3 days before the start. Everything was accounted for. Everything matched the list. Until I opened the back of the storage trailer behind the school. Tucked in a cardboard box beneath the string lights and faux cobwebs was a lantern I had never seen before. Paper. Deep red. Maybe 12 inches across. It had black wooden framing and a strange mark on the top. 3 curled lines, forming a kind of spiral triangle. Hand-drawn in faded ink. I brought it to the others. Asked if anyone had slipped it in with the rest of the decor. No one had. One of the freshmen said, "Looks cool though." But none of the volunteers claimed it. Something about it felt wrong. I didn't like the paper. It wasn't the shiny, cheap stuff. It was soft and dense, like parchment. Too old. Too serious. I set it aside, tucked it in the trash storage room behind the science wing. The next morning, it was hanging, right on the center pole of the square. Same red lantern. Same strange symbol. Exactly where the accident happened last year. I thought maybe someone was messing with me. I pulled it down and checked the frame again. Still unmarked. No tag. No brand. I took it home that evening. Left it in my garage. The next afternoon, I went to help string the overhead lights. And there it was again. Hanging. Glowing. Which was strange, because it wasn't connected to anything. The sun was still out. But inside that red paper, a soft light pulsed like breath. I stared at it for a long minute before one of the seniors asked if I was okay. I took it down again. This time, I cut the cord and crushed the frame a little. I tossed it in the back of my truck and drove it to the school dumpster myself. That evening, I was carrying a toolbox through town when one of the older folks, Mr. Hanley, who used to run the feed store, squinted at the square and said, "Huh. I figured kids didn't hang spirit lights anymore. They will today." I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head. "Used to hang those to call things home. I would not now." I stayed late the night of the 30th. Mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I wanted to make sure no one was sneaking back to mess with the decorations. But really, I was waiting for the lantern. And sure enough, around 10, it flickered back on. I was standing near the town gazebo, watching the last few floats get parked. The square was empty by then, all the volunteers gone home. But that soft, rhythmic glow blinked to life. Slow, like breathing. And, I swear, It matched the sound of footsteps across the square. One step. Flicker. Another. Flicker. I climbed up on the stool and pulled it down for the third time. As I turned it in my hands, I noticed something I hadn't before. Shallow carvings on the underside of the wooden ring, almost invisible unless the light hit right. They read, "This lantern does not belong to this festival. It do no potter name." I looked up. Across the square, near the edge of the courthouse lawn, a small figure stood, barely lit, face turned away, motionless. I didn't move. Neither did he. And I don't know why. But I didn't call out. I burned it the next morning behind the school. I set it in a metal barrel, poured lighter fluid, and struck a match. The flame caught fast, curling the red paper into black ribbons. For a second, it smelled like old dust and wet leaves. Then something sharper filled the air, thick and chemical, like burning plastic. I had to step back and cover my mouth. It left almost no ash, just a blackened ring and a thin gray smoke that drifted straight up, even with no wind. I told myself it was over. I wanted to believe that. By the afternoon of the 31st, the festival was in full swing. The square was alive again. Lights strung across the gazebo, food booths lining the street, music echoing off the brick storefronts. I kept busy fixing cables, answering radio calls, anything to keep my mind from wandering. But around 8, when the parade was halfway through, I looked up at the main pole. The red lantern was there again, hanging exactly where it had always been. No one seemed to notice. Kids ran past it. Parents laughed. The glow from the overhead lights washed it out enough that it looked almost normal. I stared at it until someone tapped my shoulder, asking for a power adapter. I nodded, pretended I hadn't seen anything. After the crowd thinned and the booths closed, I stayed behind to do a final walkthrough. The lights all tested fine. Generators shut off in sequence. Nothing flickered. Nothing tripped. For the first time in weeks, it was quiet, peaceful even. The wind picked up around midnight. I was rolling up extension cords when I noticed a shadow move across the stage. Someone was climbing the stairs, heading toward the pole. I called out, "Hey, we're closed up." No answer. I walked closer, the boards creaking under my boots. The shape disappeared behind the platform. My flashlight caught only the trusses and the empty railing. The lantern swayed gently in the breeze above me. Then it brightened. The glow bled through the paper, hot and red, lighting the entire pole like a beacon. I froze where I stood. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning. And then I saw him. A boy, standing at the base of the pole. Same size, same costume as Connor last year. The black shirt with white bone paint, the cheap skeleton gloves. His face was turned up toward the lantern, eyes lost in the light. I took one step forward. The lantern flared brighter, flooding the stage in red. For a second, I could see every line of his face, every smear of paint. Then it snapped out. Darkness. Complete. Something cold brushed past my shoulder. A whisper cut the air right beside my ear. "You forgot my name again." This phasing, I spun around, heart pounding. The stage was empty. Only the lantern rope swung in slow circles above me. When I looked toward the sign-in board pinned to the back of the gazebo, my breath caught. There, below the list of volunteers, was a new name. Fresh ink. Same handwriting as mine. Connor Tills. I didn't tell anyone. Not that night. Not ever. I took a leave from the school the next week. Said I needed time. Every morning I checked the festival roster in the office. His name was always there. The next day, it would be gone. Then back again. At home, I started seeing a faint red glow in the reflection of my front window after dark. Always in the same spot. Always steady. Like a lantern swaying on its own. I never joined the festival again. For 15 years, I'd helped light the square. Now, when October comes, I keep my curtains closed, and I let someone else turn on the lights. I found the box by accident. It had no barcode, no accession slip, just a thin layer of dust and a handwritten label across the front that read, Hallowell, Special Index in Library Use Only. I was clearing out the final row of Halloween-themed materials in the Townsend Public Library archive, most of which hadn't been touched since the 70s. The card box wasn't on the manifest. I almost passed it over. The lid was warped, and the wood had a split running down one side. It looked more like an old recipe tin than library property, but the handwriting caught my eye. Sharp, slanted, and fading like ink pressed under a heavy thumb. No one had ever mentioned Hallowell to me. I'd lived in Townsend nearly my whole life. There was no Hallowell Road, no township by that name nearby, no schools or parishes that matched. I checked the local map pinned by the reference desk. Nothing. I opened the box. Inside were hundreds of library index cards, filed loosely, unalphabetized. They looked like checkout records, but odd. Each one was labeled Hal, followed by a 4-digit number. Names, dates, locations, handwritten in tight script, some shakier than others. The first card stopped me cold. Hal 0147, name, Darren G. B. 2009. D. 2024. Item, lantern craft for beginners. Notes, returned late. Light remained. I knew that name. Darren Graham had just passed away the week before. A freak electrical fire in his garage. 14 years old. The town was still holding its breath about it. I checked the date on the card. 1974. I sat back and stared at it. Same name. Same birth year. Same age at death. The details didn't match completely, but it was too close. Too strange. I flipped through more of the cards. A girl named Lacey M. from 1981. A boy named Corey J. with the note, forgotten by family, held by shelves. None of them were in our system. None showed up in the digital catalog. I searched by item code, by name, by year. Nothing. It was like the box had been skipped entirely during digitization. That night, I asked two of the older librarians, Susan and Charles, if they'd ever seen it. Both of them just blinked. Susan said, "Where was it?" And when I pointed, she shook her head. "That section was cleared out before you got here." This being herself, I wanted to forget it. I put the box on my side desk and planned to leave it there until after the holiday rush. But when I logged into my admin terminal the next evening, a new message sat waiting in my inbox. No subject. No sender. The message body was just one line. Do not digitize what no longer remembers. Is not could have God stains. I checked the email path. It came from an internal ID, but the number didn't match any account in the system. I shut the monitor off and left 20 minutes early. That week, I started dreaming. Always the same image. Cards from the box, sliding one by one through my fingers, then through cracks in the floor. Ink bleeding. A child's voice counting. Softly at first, then louder. By the time I woke, I could still hear it echoing behind my ears. 13, 14, 15, and still counting. I told myself I would throw the box out, or at least seal it up, shove it back where I found it. But when I opened it again the following Friday, one card had risen to the top, as if it had been waiting. Hal 0993. Name, Irene L. B. 1993. D. 2024. Item, Reader's Ledger. Personal. Notes. Final line due. Submit. October 31. I slammed the box shut and nearly dropped it. My chest felt tight. My name. My birth year. That was my card. I left the library without checking out. Just grabbed my coat and walked straight to my car. When I came back the next morning, the box was gone. I reported it the way I was supposed to, filled out a missing archive form, logged the incident in the internal catalog, and flagged it for the branch manager. But the entry was rejected. No such box on file, the system said. Not archived, not inventoried, not part of any known collection. I checked the storage camera. The feed glitched for exactly 7 minutes. The same stretch I would have been gone the night before. The logs from my computer showed no sign-in after 5 p.m., but a file had been created during that time anyway. A folder called Hallowell, created by my login. I didn't open it. Not right away. My hands hovered over the mouse, but I just stared at the screen. The icon pulsed slightly, like a soft flicker, and I swear I could feel heat from it. When I blinked, the image of the index card, my card, was still burned into my mind. The next morning, someone left an envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single index card. Same size, same faded ink. At the top, Darren G. Again, but now there was a new line beneath the others. Reinstated, properly seen. I leaned back, trying not to panic. My name had been there once too. I remembered the phrasing. Final line due. Submit, October 31. I deleted the Hallowell folder, logged out of everything, shut the machines down one by one, and unplugged them from the wall. I printed out what I could. Backup files, fragment logs, then burned them in my kitchen sink. That was the day I decided to quit. I didn't file an official notice. I just packed what I could, left the key with Charles, and said I needed a break. He didn't ask questions. By the 30th, I had scrubbed the house clean. No cards, no catalogs, nothing with my name printed out. I turned off my phone. No Wi-Fi, no devices. The air felt still again, like something had passed. Halloween morning, I went into town for the first time in days. I thought I could breathe a little, just a coffee and a walk. I wandered through the downtown bookstore. The children's section was already dressed in orange garlands and paper pumpkins. And then I saw it. A slim paperback with no publisher stamp. Just a dull beige cover, the kind made for in-house reprints. Across the top, printed in soft red, Stories for Those Who Were Forgotten. Below that, in smaller text, compiled by Irene L. My legs locked. I picked it up with both hands. Inside were copies of the Hallowell cards. Word for word, page after page. Every name, every note. Mine was last. I turned to the final page. It read, "You still have time, if no one else has seen your name." Weak and sacked, my hands shook as I closed the book. I looked around. No one seemed to notice what I was holding, except for the child. She stood across from me at the edge of the aisle. Pale sweatshirt, dark curls, no expression. One finger pointed to the cover of the book. She looked up at me and asked, calm as anything, "You're the last one, right?" Issa's, I dropped the book. My breath caught in my chest. I turned to walk away. Fast. Didn't look back. I didn't realize it until I reached the parking lot. But something had slipped from my coat pocket. A card. Plain. White. But now it had a new line. Scribbled in. Submission complete. I lost my job a few weeks later. Officially, it was for data mismanagement, but no one pushed for details. I moved away from Townsend, found a quiet rental outside of Crossville, kept off the internet. I stopped using my last name. But every year around October, a plain envelope finds me. Inside is a blank index card. No stamp, no return address. Just one line, printed in fading ink. Reinstatement, pending. I still haven't written anyone else's name on it. But sometimes I wonder what would happen if I did. My name's Wayne Holloway. I'm 47 years old. And for the past 7 years, I've been the caretaker at a small civil cemetery just outside Irwin, Tennessee. It's not a big place. Maybe 30 headstones scattered across a grassy slope, surrounded by old oak trees and quiet wind. Every morning I walk the same loop, starting at the front gate and ending at the far west row, where one particular marker stood out. It was a low, rounded stone with no name, no dates, just a single number carved into the surface, 39. I couldn't tell you when I first started noticing it. Maybe it was because it leaned a little off-center, or maybe because it looked older than the others. I'd asked Dwight, the previous groundskeeper, about it once. He just shrugged and said it was probably an unclaimed grave from way back. Then came the morning of October 30. I was doing my usual round when I saw something off. That stone, number 39, wasn't where it was supposed to be. It was lying right in the middle of the main path, a good 10 feet from its usual spot. The grass around it was flattened, like someone had dragged it across the ground. I muttered something under my breath, probably blaming teenagers. Halloween always brought out a few pranksters. I hauled the stone back where it belonged and patted the dirt down. Didn't think much of it at the time. But that night, something started to feel off. I had stayed late to fix one of the fences near the northeast boundary. Fog rolled in earlier than usual, thick and heavy. Around 6 p.m., I heard a strange hissing sound. Not loud, but enough to make me pause. I swept my flashlight over the grass and spotted a deep dent right next to marker 39, like someone had been sitting there, heavy and still. No footprints, just that one depression in the grass. I didn't say anything, but I took a strip of red cloth from my toolkit and tied it around the nearest oak. A marker, so I could check again in the morning. I slept in the watch cabin that night, heard nothing but wind. Next morning, I walked straight to the west row. The stone was back where it should be, but the red cloth, it wasn't on the tree anymore. It had been tied, neatly and tight, around the base of the stone. I called Dwight, even though he'd retired nearly 2 years back. At first, he laughed it off, told me the Halloween air was getting to me. But when I mentioned the cloth and the dent in the grass, his tone shifted. "I moved that stone a few times," he said, voice low, "but it always comes back. These acted with most aim in the great, with called a few no's." I just sat there on the front step for a while, the phone still in my hand. The birds were still chirping, same as always. The cemetery looked no different, but deep down, I felt something had shifted. Not fear. Exactly. Just a sense that I was caught in something I didn't understand. That night, October 31, I stayed again. Not because anyone told me to, but because I had to see it through. I brought the big flashlight, checked all the locks, turned on every single floodlight outside. Around 9 p.m., the fog got so thick I couldn't see the fence line just 20 steps away. I sat in the watch cabin, watching the monitors and the window that faced west. At about 10:30, I saw a figure standing beside gravestone 39. No light, no movement, just a person-shaped shadow in the fog, still as the stone itself. I hit the floodlight straight in that direction. No one was there. I ran outside, flashlight up, boots sinking into the wet ground. All I found was disturbed grass and cold air. No footprints, no heat, just silence. When I got back to the cabin, something made me stop at the door. There was a trail of dark, wet mud smeared across the floor, starting from the door and stretching in a winding line back toward the direction of marker 39. I locked the door behind me and made sure every light in that cemetery was turned on. Even dragged a spare workbench in front of the door, just for good measure. I wasn't scared exactly, but something about that trail of mud, it felt like a warning, or maybe an invitation. Around midnight, I checked the security footage. The system was old but still functional. What I saw made my stomach tighten. There was a 2-minute gap in the recording, right, between 10:29 and 10:31 p.m., the exact window when I saw that figure by the stone. It wasn't a glitch. The footage just cut, like someone had paused the whole world and started it again. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out to marker 39. Or where it should have been. It was gone. I scanned the area and caught a glimpse of it standing near the central memorial, nearly 80 meters from where it belonged. There were no drag marks, no footprints, no tire tracks. It was just there, planted firmly, like it had always been, like it had chosen to move. I stood there for a good minute, just staring at it. Then I whispered out loud, "All right, you win. Things are doppin'." I turned around and walked back to the cabin without touching it. Part of me thought maybe that was the end of it. By 2 a.m., the fog started lifting, the wind picked up, and the grass began to glisten under the floodlights. Everything was still. I leaned back in the chair by the window, let my eyes close for just a second. When I opened them again, it was nearly 3. Out of habit, I looked through the glass. Marker 39 was back in its spot, perfectly upright, pressed tight into the dirt like it had never moved. I exhaled slow and muttered, "All right, you came back. Fine." Isn't attacked. At 3:03 a.m., there was a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Hard. Then nothing. I sat up fast, grabbed the flashlight, and crept toward the door. Didn't call out. Didn't ask who it was. Just waited a second, listening. Then I opened it. No one was there. But right in the center of the doorstep was a small mound of fresh dirt. Still moist. Still warm. My chest tightened. I took a step outside, scanned left, right. Not a sound. Not a breeze. I turned back toward the cabin and stopped cold. There was someone inside, standing by the desk, facing away from me, wearing dark clothes, arms still by their sides, body perfectly motionless. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard footsteps. My heart started pounding. I stepped through the doorway slow, barely breathing. The room feels like it's holding its breath. I reach for the switch and flick the light on. The room is empty. Gone. Just like that. Except for one thing. On the desk, right where that figure had been standing, was a small piece of stone, smooth on the sides, jagged on one end, and carved into it, faint but clear, was the number 39. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, didn't turn off the lights. When morning came, I wrote up a transfer request. I didn't give a reason. I just told them the fog was starting to mess with my breathing. That was enough. I never went back. But the new guy, James, I think his name was, called me the following Halloween, said someone had left a chunk of stone and a bit of fresh dirt on the watch cabin's front step. He laughed about it, thought it was a prank. But that stone had a number too. Same one. Every October since then, someone finds it again. A small mound of dirt, a broken stone marked 39, and no one ever sees who leaves it. "You might not want this thing back," she said, setting it carefully on the counter. It was Ruth. She'd been coming to my shop for years, usually around the fall. Quiet woman, maybe in her 60s. Always took her time browsing, never bought much. That day, though, she didn't look like she came to browse. The thing she brought in was a white papier-mâché mask. No eyes, no mouth, no features, just smooth and slightly lopsided, with a faded gloss that caught the light in an odd way. She placed it like it might break if she let go too fast. I asked where she got it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "Every time someone wears this, they start saying things that aren't theirs." Her eyes didn't leave the mask when she said it. That got my attention. I picked it up, turned it over. No label, no maker's mark. Just the dry feel of old paper and paint, and a smell like dust and something faintly metallic. You sold it to me, Ruth said quietly. 4 years ago. Is no Junat. I looked at her, trying to place it. I've owned Rungku since I was 38, and over the years, I've sold thousands of odd pieces to people passing through Waynesville. Some antiques stick with you, but this one didn't. I couldn't recall ever seeing it before. She didn't want her money back. Didn't want anything, really. Just said she couldn't keep it anymore. Said it made people strange. I asked her what she meant by strange. She said, I don't speak Italian, but I started dreaming in it. Then she turned and left without saying another word. I left the mask on the shelf near the window, leaning it between a rusted metronome and an antique bread tin. No tag, no price. I just figured it would sit there like everything else, gathering dust. That night, around 1 in the morning, I heard something fall. I live upstairs above the shop. No wind, no storm, no reason for anything to be moving. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs. The mask had fallen off the shelf. Nothing else was touched. No signs of animals or movement. But when I picked it up, I noticed something I hadn't before. The white paint was fading, yellowing in patches like old paper, like it had aged 10 years in a few hours. I set it back and returned upstairs. But I didn't sleep easy. The next morning, the discoloration was worse. The smooth white was now mottled, uneven. Still, a college student came in just after lunch, saw it, and bought it on the spot. Said he was heading to a Halloween party and wanted something simple but weird in a good way. End process. He came back 2 days later. Calm voice, polite smile. Nothing about him seemed off until he asked, Hey, do you ever hear someone laughing in this place? They were not within. I said no. He nodded, like that made sense, then left. That was the last time I saw him. 3 days later, his picture showed up in the local paper. Search and rescue had found him wandering deep in the forest, 12 miles from town. He couldn't explain how he got there or what he'd been doing. The only thing found with him was that same mask, dry and clean, sitting on the front step of my store. I didn't touch it, just stared at it from behind the glass until the sun went down. Around closing time, Ruth came back. She looked at the mask and said, It finds the person it fits best. One each year. If. I asked what she meant. She didn't answer. Just walked away, like she was already too late. That night, I locked it in the storage room. Double bolt. Reinforced door. Just to be sure. I told myself it was just for peace of mind. But around 2:30 in the morning, the security feed glitched. 1 minute of pure static. When the video came back, the mask was no longer in the storage room. It was back on the front counter, facing the glass door. I rewound the footage 3 times. The glitch only happened once. Just 60 seconds of static and one frame where something passed across the lens. Not clearly. Not fully. Just a thin shape moving sideways through the grain, like someone walking fast and slightly hunched. I never saw a face, but I knew what it was moving toward. The mask had not just returned. It had been placed. It was waiting. I closed the shop the next morning and taped a handwritten sign on the door. It said we'd be closed through Halloween. Customers knocked, but I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the old sales ledger and started flipping back through the years. 4 names popped up. All of them had bought that same white mask. Different years, different stories, but each one came back soon after, and every one of them said something that didn't sound like it came from them. One man disappeared for 3 weeks. Another was arrested for shouting nonsense in a grocery store parking lot. One woman stopped talking completely and walked into the forest barefoot in the middle of November. None of them had any memory of what they did. I tried calling Ruth. No answer. Just an old voicemail greeting and a beep. The mask was gone again. I searched the shelves, the storage room, even the attic. That was when I saw the envelope lying just inside the shop door. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a black and white photograph of 5 people standing shoulder to shoulder in front of a wooden stage. Each of them wore the same kind of mask. White. Featureless. The background was old, warped by time, but I recognized the crooked lettering above the stage. It was my shop's name. Faded paint. Older sign, but clear as day. I sat there for a long time, staring at that photo. I thought about calling the police, but couldn't imagine the words. What would I even report? That a haunted mask had mailed me a picture of itself. By nightfall, I remembered something my mother once told me. When something unwanted comes back more than once, you don't throw it away. You seal it. I dragged out the heavy iron chest from the back room, the one my grandfather had brought from overseas. I lined it with salt and old paper talismans my mother used to hide in drawers. I placed the mask inside and latched it shut. Then I sat down against the chest and waited for something to change. That night stayed quiet. I didn't sleep, just kept listening. Around 2:20 in the morning, I heard it. 3 soft knocks on the front window. I got up and looked outside. The street was empty. No cars, no wind. Just a light fog twisting around the curb. I walked back to the storage room and froze in the doorway. The chest was wide open. The latch was still locked in place. Nothing broken. Nothing forced. The mask was on the floor, facing the chair I had been sitting in just hours earlier. It looked heavier somehow, more real than it had before. The air around it pressed in like a held breath. That is when I hear it. A voice. Low, soft, close to my ear. It says, "If I just laughed, would you believe you're wearing me already?" I stopped breathing. I look toward the mirror hanging near the back door. My reflection stares back, but it is wrong. I am not wearing my glasses. My skin looks too pale. My face is too still. And I am wearing the mask. My hands shoot up to pull it off, but there is nothing there. Just skin. My mouth opens, but the sound that comes out isn't mine. It's distant, like hearing someone scream through glass. When I blink, the mirror is empty. The next morning, the mask is gone. The chest is shut tight again, and the photograph lies face up on the floor where I dropped it. But now there is a 6th person standing at the edge of the group. It is me. I closed the shop after that, packed a bag and left town without saying goodbye. I never told anyone what happened. Sometimes I hear about other shops in nearby towns, places where someone finds an old white mask, clean and plain, sitting on a shelf, and if they listen close enough before putting it on, they hear one thing. Did you hear me laugh? When I moved back home, I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. I was 25, newly single, unemployed, and more tired than I wanted to admit. My parents still lived in the same 2-story house on the edge of Shady Valley, just past the last set of mailboxes and into the trees. The air there had a stillness I'd forgotten, and a silence that felt like it was waiting. From the window of my old bedroom, you could see the tree line bend away toward the old youth camp, the one everyone called the Green Hollow site. It had been closed for 10 years. That place had burned during a Halloween bonfire. 3 people died. I was 15. I remember standing at this same window and watching orange light flicker through the trees like someone waving torches in the dark. The investigation blamed a faulty fire pit. The town shut the camp down and sealed it off with fences and warning signs. Over time, people stopped talking about it, but the outline of the clearing was still there, still visible. From our hill on nights, the wind shifted. The first night, I was back. I stood at the window again. Same angle, same view, just an older face in the glass. Around 11, I saw a light. Soft, flickering, a low orange pulse far off in the trees, right where the old campfire ring used to be. I called my dad into the room. He squinted but saw nothing. My mom said maybe it was just porch light bouncing through the woods, but I knew where the camp had been. That glow had no business being there. The next morning, I asked about it again. My dad shook his head and said the place was sealed tight. Big metal fence. New signs. No one went near it. My mom added, "People need to leave ghosts where they are." That was a never Bose. But 2 nights later, I saw the fire again. Same glow. Same spot. No wind. No movement. Just that steady burn like someone had lit a small bonfire and left it there. Untouched. I pointed it out to my parents. But again, they saw nothing. I thought maybe I was losing it. Stress. Maybe. The breakup had shaken more loose in me than I admitted. But I could not stop watching that light. Every night it showed up, only visible through my window. On the third night, I put on boots and a jacket and walked down the back trail until I reached the fence. The warning signs were still up, rusted, but clear. Keep out in red paint. But I noticed something else too. There were footprints, clear in the tall grass, pressed down like someone had walked barefoot through the weeds. They led straight into the campgrounds. I crouched by the fence, heart beating too fast. From beyond the trees, I heard clapping. Slow, then a small laugh, quick and soft like someone trying not to be heard. Then nothing. The woods swallowed the sound as fast as it had given it. I stepped back, then turned and walked home without looking again. That night, I sat in bed, eyes wide, waiting for something more. Nothing came. No light. No voice. Just a hollow kind of silence that felt heavier than noise. The next evening, October 30th, I couldn't help myself. I waited until my parents were asleep, then slipped out and made my way back to the fence. This time, I went through it. Someone had cut a gap low near the corner. Old, almost hidden, but wide enough to crawl. Inside the camp, everything was quiet. The wooden cabins sagged under their own weight. The trail was soft with leaves. When I reached the fire circle, I stopped moving. The ashes were still there, a wide ring of charred earth and burnt stone. But the ash was warm. I knelt and hovered my hand just above the center. It gave off heat. Then I heard breathing. I turned and saw them. A group of people sitting around the fire circle, shoulders hunched, backs facing me. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They just sat, facing the center of a fire that wasn't burning. I stepped back. The air turned cold. My throat felt tight, and I couldn't find my voice. One of the chairs was empty. Smoke curled up from it like it had just been vacated. I backed away from the clearing, careful not to snap any twigs. The warmth from the ash still clung to my skin like it didn't want to let go. By the time I got home, I felt chilled and breathless, like the cold had sunk beneath my clothes. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was old heat trapped under the ground. Maybe the figures had been shadows or dead trees bent the right way. But every explanation felt paper thin. I walked over to the house next door. Miss Evelyn had lived there longer than anyone. She rarely came out now, but when she saw me on her porch, she just nodded like she had been expecting it. I asked if she remembered the old campfire accident. She didn't answer at first. Then she said, real low, "Not everyone sees the fire. But if you do, that means it's seen you too." I left her porch with my hands cold and empty. That afternoon, I went through some boxes in the closet. My childhood things. Old notebooks, stuffed animals, crumpled folders. I found one of my school journals tucked behind a stack of magazines. Inside, on the last page, were 3 names written in red ink. I didn't remember writing them, but they matched the names of the 3 people who had died in the campfire accident 10 years ago. My stomach turned cold. The notebook had been inside a sealed box in my closet, one I hadn't opened since coming back. I tried to tear the page out, but the ink had soaked through. It stained the next 3 sheets like it had bled forward. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I drew the curtains tight and tried to forget the clearing. Rain tapped the roof, light and steady. October 31st had come. By 11, I drifted off, finally at peace. No fire tonight, no flickers in the trees. The house was quiet. At midnight, I woke up to a sound, a soft crackle, like logs shifting in a flame. It was coming from just outside the window. I stood, peeled back the curtain. Nothing there. No light. Just wet glass and empty lawn. But on the windowsill, pressed into the wood, was a pile of ash, damp, black, and recent. I turned toward the hallway. Something was wrong. There was a smell now. Smoke, faint but spreading. It came from downstairs. I crept down the steps and saw the flicker before I reached the bottom. A low orange glow danced against the walls of the living room. When I turned the corner, I froze. 3 chairs sat around our fireplace. They weren't ours. Wooden. Old. One of them creaked like someone had just stood up. A 4th chair sat in front of the flame, smoke curling gently from the seat cushion. It faced the fire. Empty. Waiting. Then I hear it. Not a voice in the room. A voice in my head. Dry. Soft. Close. Now we are 4. My legs turned to stone. I could not breathe. The room was too bright, too quiet. The fire flickered but gave off no heat. I stepped back, heart pounding, but the glow followed me. The firelight did not stop at the hearth. It moved. It pulsed like something breathing. I ran to my room and locked the door, crawled into the corner and waited for morning. When the sun rose, the chairs were gone. The ash was gone, but my window was still marked. A smudge of soot, just enough to show something had been there. I moved out 3 months later without saying goodbye. I did not give a reason. Since then, I have never lit another fire. Not a candle. Not a match. On Halloween, I unplug everything and sleep in a room without windows. But some years, near the end of October, I open my closet and smell wet ash. Not strong. Just enough to know it has not forgotten me. It came in a cardboard box. No return address. Just my name in neat block letters and a postmark from somewhere in the Midwest. Inside was a small Halloween lantern, shaped like a pumpkin, made from thin orange painted tin. Its face was a wide smile with triangular eyes. But the paint had faded and the edges curled in like dried leaves. There were no wires, no power switch, no place for batteries. It was hollow and cool to the touch. Along with it came a folded scrap of paper, stiff with age. It read, "Return the light on the right night, and keep the face the same." I had seen plenty of strange pieces over the years. Restoring antique toys was my work and my hobby. People mailed me oddities all the time. But this one felt different the moment I set it down on my bench. I left it in the center of the workshop while I cleared space. That night, I turned off the lights and locked up like always. From the hallway upstairs, I noticed something. A faint orange glow, pulsing from the cracks under the door. I came back down, thinking maybe I had left something on. But the room was still. No heat, no smell, no sound. Just the lantern, glowing softly, its grin lit from the inside. I picked it up. The glow faded as soon as I touched it. No warmth, no hidden mechanism. I flipped it over, shook it gently, listened close. Nothing. It was empty. The next morning, I disassembled the base with small tools, hoping for some trick of copper or chemical coating. There was nothing inside but tin and time. Still, I could not stop thinking about the way it had lit up on its own. Curiosity got the better of me. I took a few photos and posted them on a vintage collectors forum. Within the hour, someone commented, "That model was supposedly pulled from shelves after a fire in 1957. A daycare Halloween party. 3 fatalities. Only one lantern like that was ever recovered. The name in the fire report was a boy named Emery. Something about that stayed in my head. The next day, I cleaned the interior gently with alcohol swabs, and under a layer of soot, I found something etched in tiny cursive near the rim. It read, Emery. I stared at the name for a long time. I did not know why it bothered me. Maybe it was the way it had been hidden, like it was not meant to be forgotten, just buried. After each step of cleaning, the glow came back stronger. A deeper orange, sharper edges. But only when I was alone. I tested it, brought in a friend one evening. Nothing happened. The moment he left, the light returned. By the end of the week, the grin on the pumpkin had cleared. The paint still flaked around the mouth, but the expression was sharp again. I took out a fine brush and orange enamel, preparing to restore the face. The moment my brush touched the surface, it slipped, dropped from my fingers, landed against the tin. A thin crack split downward from the right eye to the corner of the mouth, jagged and dark like a scar. The lantern lit up instantly, not a soft glow, but bright and wild, like something had caught fire inside it. The smell changed. Not paint, not dust. Burnt plastic, melted rubber, old smoke. I turned off the workshop lights. What I saw made my breath stop. In the reflection of the lantern's face, something moved. A small figure sat across from me at the workbench. I could not see features, just shape and size. Legs dangling, head tilted slightly, like it was listening. I did not turn around. I could not. The next morning, I boxed the lantern in thick cloth and wood. I did not tell anyone why. Just told myself it was better put away. But that night, when I came down for a glass of water, I saw the light again. It seeped through the cracks of the box like smoke made of firelight. The glow pulsed, slow and steady, and I stood there in the dark hallway watching it. Something about it felt less like danger and more like insistence, like it was trying to finish something I had started. I took it outside and buried it, dug 2 feet deep behind the workshop, packed the earth tight, marked it with a stone. The yard was still and silent. But the next morning, it was back, sitting exactly where it had been, clean, dry, lit from within like it had never left. The crack down its face looked even sharper now, like a grin deepening. I called an old friend of mine, Mark. He used to work in folklore preservation, had seen things I never wanted to believe. I told him what was happening. He didn't laugh. He said, some things are not meant to be fixed. They do not want to be changed. They just want someone to remember they were real. You came, bro. That stayed with me. That night, I sat down and painted the face exactly as it had been. Every angle, every imperfection. I even traced the crack in with a finer brush to make it match. When I finished, the lantern stopped glowing. The workshop stayed dark for the first time in days. I waited an hour. Then 2. I stayed downstairs, just to be sure. Eventually, I fell asleep in the chair. At 2:45 inches the morning, I woke up to light on my face. Harsh, direct. The lantern was glowing again, but not like before. This time, there was a handprint inside the tin, pressed against the inner wall of the lantern, small and pale. Fingers spread wide like it had pushed from within. I could not move. The glass cabinet across the room began to shake. Light toys, plastic, metal, all of them rattling in place like something was knocking from inside. Then they turned. Every toy in the workshop rotated, slowly, until they faced the lantern. Their plastic eyes, stitched faces, wooden noses, all pointed toward it. The room went dead quiet. Then I heard it. A voice. Light, young, very clear. Thank you for fixing me right. The glow faded. The cabinet stilled. The toys stopped moving. But I stood there until sunrise. waiting for something more. Nothing came. After that, I stopped taking toy commissions, switched to carpentry, wooden chairs, tables, simple work, no faces, no light. I kept the lantern, never displayed it, never opened it again. But every Halloween, just before midnight, it lights up for exactly 60 minutes. Then it goes dark, silent, still. Sometimes, in that light, I see shadows move behind it. Something small, quick, never far. Just enough to know it is still here, still waiting to be seen.